There, at the beginning of the video, you can see my cool shirt. So this is Nikki Haverstock, and this is another writer's advice video. So after looking at the few comments that I've gotten, and thank you so much for the comments, I realized that maybe my last topic was a little too advanced. So I wanted to do a topic that I wouldn't call it a beginner topic, because that implies that it's only applicable to beginners. I would just say it's applicable to a larger variety of writers, which is 6 things that I've learned since writing my first book. These are not the only 6 things. These are probably not even the best 6 things, but these are things that I think anyone, anywhere in their journey, these are my notes, anywhere in their journey can relate to. And it's possible, I'm thinking that most of you probably, if you've been writing for a while, might know this, but you know, maybe there's some jumping off points for discussion. So the first one is, the first thing I learned is how much thinking time I need. And that's just specific to me. But when I started and I read about all the different kinds of writers, plotters and pantsers and stuff, no one told me that you're gonna need bucket loads of time. For me personally, it's so much. And the real point that I wanna get to with that is that labels can be helpful and hurtful. I think we know that. I think we know in general. But I think when we start and someone says, are you a pantser or a plotter, and they explain them, there can be a little bit of relief, like, oh, you mean I'm not the only person who just dives right in? Or, oh, you mean I'm not the only person who has to know it all before they can write a single thing. And then there's other, then as you get farther along, maybe you learn about things like quilters who do a bunch of scenes and kind of knit, quilt them together. Maybe a gardener where the story kind of goes on its own and you clip. But at some point you kind of run out of terms. And that's when I think having a label can box you in, because you go, well, I'm a pantser, but everyone else who pants does A, and so I have to do A because that's what I am. Or the reverse, which is I'm a pantser and that's something plotters do, so I'm not going to try it. And I think that's where you kind of have to say, okay, these labels have limits on them. So for me, and I learned about this through strength testing, strength finder test, the Clifton or Gallup strength finder test, which is something I learned in a class with Becca Syme, who has a channel here called QuitCast. I will put the link down below. I am not going to mention things that cost money a lot, because I just think in general most of the really good information is free out there. But Becca is someone who I do respect. I don't get any money. You can tell her I sent you. She will know that. But I just mentioned this because it was so instrumental to me, that when I learned that one of my strengths is thinking on something. I can put an idea or a question I have, I call it on my back brain. I imagine it like a stove, and you've got that back burner where you make like stock. Chicken stock, if you don't know what I mean by stock, and I can leave an idea there and it just simmers in the background, and then all of a sudden one day I go, oh, I got it. It needs a fire-breathing dragon dog, which is my Dragons Are Mage's Best Friend book. That was kind of that thing that kind of was that thing that I needed for that book, and I didn't know I needed for that book. So for me, that was something, and none of the plotting and pantsing and quilting and gardening talked about that, because that was unique to me. So the first thing I learned was how different my process was going to be than other people, and that was okay. That was something I judged a lot. I was like, why can't I just write? Why everyone else can just write? And so the first thing is to realize that there might be aspects of your process that are very important to you that no one else, not that no one else, but that not everybody else does, okay? So these plotting and pantsing and quilting and gardening and all these ideas, kind of hold them loosely and realize that your vision might be a little bit different. And I have a really concrete example. I've mentioned before that I'm in a small writing group of 5 of us. I have a friend, Zoe York, who also has a channel, which I'll link below. And she calls herself a quilter. She kind of writes scenes out of order and all that. I have another friend named Zara Keene, who's an amazing writer who's a plotter. But I recently found out that both of them tend to write the first third of the book and then need to edit it. They actually use the same editor, and so both of them will send over chunks, because they kind of, in order to move forward, they need to smooth out the first half. I have not heard of other people, that is not a writing method that I hear mentioned a lot, but it's something they both realized is a system that works for them. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, for me, I've discovered every book is different. And what I mean is I just got through talking about my process, and what I didn't know also is that my process would change book to book. I've had books that I didn't know what I was doing. I had the first scene, I wrote, I kept the hero's journey open, and I'd kind of look at it and be like, oh yeah, that might be a good element. But I just wrote the whole thing, no clue. That was after I had my son. I wasn't sure if I could ever write again. I kind of had this idea for a paranormal cozy, and I just wrote it. Then I wrote another book I wrote was Space Murder, and I had it outlined like you would not believe. And so what I didn't know when I started was that every book was going to be really different for me. And it can be very, when you say, this is my process, it can be very disconcerting when your process changes and you think, I'm doing something wrong. I always... for me, the beginnings are always easy, and then the middle is hard, and then the end is fast. The book I'm writing right now that I should be writing this very second, every paragraph has been pulling teeth. The first 10K was okay, and it's been difficult ever since. Does that mean there's something wrong with the book? Maybe? I don't know. I only know we're these organic beings with emotions and feelings and struggles and all that. So I don't know why this book is so hard. If you know, tell me. So that's another thing that I've learned is that, number two thing is that every book is a little different for you. And that's not a normal, but it can be, it's not a normal. It's not, that's normal, and it's not something necessarily is wrong. This third one, hear me out, it doesn't get easier. Okay, I know that can freak you out if you're like, oh my gosh, this is so hard. So I play video games. The one I've played the most is World of Warcraft, and if you haven't played it, you can just kind of follow along. When you start, you're given this character, you have one spell, maybe two spells. You can hit things, you have one spell. Then eventually you level up, you get two spells. Then you level up and you get three spells. And the idea is, as you gain your skill, the difficulty gets more and more. You have more spells. By the time you get to 60, because I prefer classic, by the time you get to level 60, you've got dozens of spells, you've got buttons everywhere, you've got equipment that's special things, you've got cooldowns, you've got all this stuff. But the idea is it's still as difficult. It doesn't suddenly get so easy or so hard. Now, if you really play World of Warcraft, you might be like, well, actually, the 30s are easy, and then you hit 40 and it gets significantly harder. Okay, well, that's a perfect analogy then. So what I mean is, when I started, I knew it would never be easy, because if it was easy, everyone would do it. But I thought it would get easier. And there have been times when it's gotten easier, and then it gets harder again, because what you're striving to do gets more difficult. Which leads into my next point, which is you can know something and continue to learn it over and over and over again. So the fourth thing is that even the things you know, you will know more deeply over time. So this is a great example, and occasionally I hear people say, well, that writer doesn't take their own advice. Kind of. They're probably trying to. No, maybe they're not. Maybe they're like, oh, you need to do A, but I don't. Maybe that's the case. But I think in general, it tends to be you're doing it to the best of your ability. Like, I think it's a given that most people who are interested in writing know that they should have a good cover. But, and when I did my first cover, you can go look at it, Death on the Range, I thought that was a really good cover. If I did it now, I still like the cover. That's why I haven't changed it. But I might make some little differences. I might make some differences because I see areas where it's maybe a little too literal. Like, I could have gotten rid of some stuff and put something more hooky in, because it literally looking like the range that it's at isn't that important. And stuff like that. So, and you should have a hooky beginning. I thought I had a hooky beginning, but over time you get a little perspective and you're like, well, if I had started it here instead of there, I think it could have been a little bit more engaging. So the idea is that even if you, and this should be an encouragement, because what it means is that even if you learn something, over time and experience, you'll learn it even better. So, so there's that. Let's see, so you can learn how much, I think, you can know something and then learn it over and over again. Oh, okay, so the fifth thing is you don't have to do all of it right this second. And so I think that's kind of that paralysis through analysis, which is it can be really, I think especially if you're self-publishing, but, and I just say that because of what I've heard people say, and then, just the fact that self-publishing is running your whole business, which is you don't have to do all, so like when you listen to it and they say you should be doing newsletter builders and you should have reader magnets and you should have a series and you should be on Ingram and you should be on wide distribution and you should have audiobooks. It can, I mean, just saying that gives me anxiety, but it can be very anxiety inducing. You don't have to do all of it right this second. It's okay if you slowly level up. So when I started, a really concrete example of that is that when I started, I was in KU. I'm still in KU because that's where I can make the most money. But when I started, I was in KU because it was so overwhelming to think about 6 distributors. So I just did 1. And then I think around book 4, I did novellas, so they were quick, quicker, I should say. I tried wide distribution. I've tried it, I don't know, 2 or 3 times. It's just never really stuck. Maybe that's part of my newsletter list that I have. Maybe that's part of how I prefer to market. Whatever reason, that's a whole other discussion. But that's where I started. I still don't have my paperbacks up on Ingram Sparks. That is on my list I have over here of things to deal with. I don't have a pop-up on I have a newsletter, but I don't have a pop-up on my website. Now, you might be thinking, oh my gosh, what a fool. Okay, fair enough. But I have because I have a lot of anxiety, I have an internal shut-off, and so if my anxiety level gets too high, I can't do anything. So it is okay if you start smaller and you build up. Now, if you are like, why in the world would you do that? I want to do everything. That's great. You're just a different person than me. So maybe you don't need this bit of help, but for those of you who do, who feel overwhelmed, who think I can't get all this done, it's okay to slowly step up your skill level. Okay, and the last thing I've learned, and this is kind of a tricky one, to try to get across what I'm trying to explain, but I think I can do it, which is I have learned and I have gained so much empathy for new writers. So I think I've always had a lot of empathy, but when I started, and I think this is not a judgment for those of you who are there. When I started, I was like, I can't believe people just don't know this. I know so much. I've got it all figured out. I've read all the plotting books. I've got it all figured out. I don't know why anyone, I think we've all been there. We've read books and we've said, I can do better. And I think we have to be there in order to start writing. Virtually everyone I know who started writing has said that, that they read a book and they went, I can do better than this. And I think you need to have that, because I think if you knew when you started how hard it was, I don't know that I would have started. If I had known how far and how, I knew it would be hard work, but it's even harder than it is. It's more rewarding than I thought it would be, but it's pretty dang hard. So if you're at that place where you have that, I'm not telling you to change that. Hold that close to your heart, because that confidence, first of all, you deserve it. You deserve to have that confidence. You don't need to be beat down. I'm not trying to beat you down. I just want to express how much empathy I have for beginning writers, and how, like, when I see someone who has a bad cover or bad blurb or something, my heart breaks for them. I don't judge them. I don't, I mean, I might objectively say that's not a good cover, at least privately in my head. If somebody asks me what they think of the cover, I might recommend that they look at genre conventions and consider about pre-mades, or, getting an artist. But I don't wish that person, like, oh, you should just quit. Never say that. And so I wish there was a way I could take all the encouragement I have in my heart and give it to you, to anyone who needs it. And how much, if you're struggling, how much I feel that for you, how badly I wish I could help you fix it, that I wish I could give you part of, some of the success that I've had, which is, I mean, depending on where you are, is either above average, or I'm certainly not pulling in big dollars, but I have had some success. And so I think that is a good normal cycle, is that, and then there's actually a graph, I was going to try to find it, where it's like when you start, so if this is, I might be doing this backwards, I think I'm doing this right. I don't know. So when you start, so if this is experience and this is your self-confidence, when you start your way up here and then the farther you go, it drops, and then hopefully you go back up. I'm at the bottom of this pit. I know how much I don't know. But I know that I've learned enough to where it's worth continuing to go. But I think it's important that you start up here, because I think you need to start with some self-confidence or some belief that you can do it, because you can, and I do believe in you. So that is my long rambling 6 things I've learned since I wrote my first book, and I hope that somewhere in there you found something that you can go, oh, that helps me to be a better writer or to feel better about this journey. So hit me up in the comments, ask questions. Whenever someone says, hey, what do you do this? I add it to my note of future topics, and I'll try to address it. Thanks so much, guys.